In this tutorial, we're going to go back to an earlier assignment, something I had mentioned, going through and building branches. I want to talk in this one about combining objects together and building missing geometry in a more manual fashion. So I'm going to start off here just by making a sphere. Oh, before I do that, render setup. I'm going to change the renderer to scanline renderer. Close that, and then make sure customize unit setup, system unit setup, 1 unit, 1 centimeter, perfect. All right, so let's go here. I'm in create sphere, keyboard entry. I'm going to set value of 100. Click create, right click and hit Z. I'm going to orbit around. I got the front view. I'm looking at the front view here. I'm going to make a cylinder. Let's click and drag and release. And now I'm going to go default sharing and turn on edged faces. So if I take this cylinder, move it over here, and rotate it, you'll notice that its default pivot point center is based on the actual pivot of the object, which makes it a little bit easier to work with. So here, I'm going to go to Modify quick. I'm going to take this cylinder, I'm going to make it thinner. But also, because we're working in games, we need to start thinking about the number of polygons that we have on an object. We don't really need to have so many edges on the sides going around, so we're going to change the number of sides from the default of 18 to 6. Now let's take this guy and let's move him back so he's sitting flush at 0 on the y-axis. I'm doing that down here. I'm in move, down at the bottom on y, 0. Okay. So we've reduced our number of sides to 6. We've kept our height segments of 5. Why don't we go ahead and we'll just quick throw a taper on it to make it a little bit more interesting. There we go. Kind of has a nice little bend to it. Now what if we take this guy, I'm going to right click and say, right click and say clone as a copy. I'm going to move it up. Let's just rotate him. So he's kind of coming out here. We'll kind of orbit around. All right, see how it's kind of out there? Let's move them so that visually from the top they're not actually connecting each other. So if we kind of zoom in and orbit around, I'm hitting Control R to orbit. We see that those two objects are kind of separated. Now what if we wanted this connected? So I'm going to select the cylinder that has its origin down closest to the sphere, because once I attach these two objects together and make them one, what's going to happen is this object will grab all these vertex points, and so this object's origin will no longer exist. So I'm going to right click and convert to edit poly. Now I only have one object selected. See, it says cylinder 1 and edit poly here. I can now find my edit geometry rollout and click attach to attach that other cylinder. Notice how the bounding box has expanded out, so they're both selected, or they're both one object now. I'm going to click the little arrow next to edit poly and go into polygon, because I want to click on what they call the cap down here at the bottom. And if you start using orbit, or if I start clicking and using orbit to move around, it orbits around whatever component you have selected. Hit delete. So if I select vertex point, for example, and I use orbit down here, it's orbiting the sub-object. It'll orbit around that component. Makes it a lot easier to work with. Also at this point, starting to use field of view zoom will also help out a lot, because it gives you more fine control than just using the middle mouse wheel. Alright, so now in edge mode, I'm going to come out here and I want to use a tool under edit edges called bridge. So I'm going to select these two edges, holding control to click on both of them, orbit around, because those two, it looks like you should be able to connect them. Well, you can by using this tool called bridge. Now bridge won't work if you still have a polygon on there. Otherwise you can start using bridge. So I'm going to click in negative space so nothing is selected and click on the bridge button. And now you can see that you can just click and drag and it's going to build the geometry in that spot. So let's grab this edge And I'm going to hit Control R to orbit. I'm going to orbit around. And same thing. Use bridge. Oops. And it'll either be easier to use the bridge tool or to manually click on two objects. You're going to need to get used to orbiting around when you're doing this kind of work. And you can only bridge objects that are or edges that are not touching each other. They got to be separated. And if I come back in here now with bridge, I can finish off my bridging. All right. Now part of what you're going to see when you do this is you got these polygons that have some ugly shading. So we can go into element when we're all done, element, click on our model, find our polygon smoothing groups rollout and hit auto smooth, and that'll clean that up, right? Right, that looks a little better. You could also, because it is a branch, just click on the model and under polygon smoothing groups hit clear all and then 1, so they're all assigned 1 smoothing group. F4 brings that all back. If I double click on the edge, another option for you if you want to fine tune after building is you could use relax, but you need to be careful because watch how extreme the changes are when I click on relax. Right, that's not so bad. There's settings in there that you can work with, but relax is going to try and make everything as flat and as boring as it possibly can. And we do want to kind of, because this is sort of a wooden stick branch arm, we kind of want to keep it a little bit chunky there. All right, so that's how you can attach those together. Now, if you wanted to say get some fingers on it, let's do that real quick. Right click and clone this as a copy. And we're going to move him up. And I'm going to use my side views to do this. Notice that my pivot is down here at the origin because I had selected the furthest guy out and then attached to it. All right, so let's take this and we're going to scale this down. Make him a little bit smaller. And oops, select that, move him over. We want to make sure we keep a little distance from the main geometry because we're going to want to be able to have space to build. Now let's right click, we're going to go into rotate, but we're going to come up here on rotate and change it to local. So now we can locally rotate it in. There we go. Now let's go to move him up a little bit so he's a little centered, and then right click, clone as a copy, move him over, go into rotate again, oops, rotate, and this time, let's see, I kind of want to orbit around so I can see what I'm doing. Orbit him over like that, and maybe bring him down a little bit, kind of adjusting and looking and seeing what I'm doing. And then one more time, clone, oops, no, I don't want a working pivot. I'm going to right click to get out of that. Right click and say clone. One more time as a copy. And then I'm going to rotate him over, down a little bit more, but then we'll move him kind of over to the side. And then maybe forward a little bit. So now if I orbit around and I see I have all these guys here, let's select them and maybe just make sure. All right, that's probably good. All right, so let's take the main arm, select that, and then go through and attach those individual little fingers to it. And from there, we're going to do the same thing. Go into polygon. I'm going to select this one here and orbit around. I'm also going to maximize the viewport. And so now I want to go through, I'm going to hit select, so I'm only on select, I don't accidentally move. I want to delete these cat polygons. I'm going to select one to make it easier to orbit around to select the main body. Okay. So now if you think of these branches kind of like fingers, right? You got one edge that's all along the very top, right? And so you're going to want to bridge in between them, kind of like the space between your fingers, like the webbing between your fingers. Let's select that and orbit around. So that's looking pretty good, I think. It's not too crazy. Maybe, let's let's grab this ring and delete that one. I think instead, let's do this. We'll come through and we'll bridge this one. I'm going to right click to get out of bridge, click on this edge, and then bridge the one beneath it. There we go. That looks a little better. All right, so I'm kind of basing everything off of this main one. So now I can find a good point to build here. And I'm going to connect the main branch, and then I want to skip up 2 edges on the side there, the very top one here, and bridge there. And then I can grab my edges over on the sides, and I should be able to, if I skip the very top one, I believe what I can do is just orbit around and bridge the sides coming over. There we go. So not that one that's all on its own there, but the next one over. I want to get to the sides of this arm. I'll bridge that. Same thing, come one down, one up, and then bridge there. All right, so we're getting there, almost done. Last thing we could do here is let's just go into border. We should be able to region select these and hit cap. And now I'm just going to click relax. You see that kind of falls apart. So let's undo that. Let's just go into vertex and just region select all these vertex points here that kind of make up this area of the hand that we just built. And we're just going to relax that. And see how that kind of moves those for us? That looks pretty good. If I grab this edge, look at them, I might say maybe take this edge here that's kind of getting pinched, and we could try relaxing that one. If you see one's getting pinched like that really bad. Otherwise, it's not too bad. What we can do is click on the word edit poly, maybe go into element, click on our model, and just clear all, and click on one so we assign them all one smoothing group. And that's how we go through and we build ourselves sort of this branch arm for our model. All right. So that's really it for that, and it teaches us a number of really useful tools in there.